What's a small act of kindness you were once shown that you'll never forget? I fainted walking up steps on my way to calculus at university. A stranger caught me and put me down on the landing. If it wasn't for him, I would have gotten very hurt. Neighbors asked to borrow my truck. Told them I could not trust my truck because the tires were bad. Next day Mr. Neighbor called and said he was getting new tires for his Suburban and I could have his old ones. Told me to just show up at this certain tire shop and they would put them on. Get to tire shop and they put on brand new Goodyear tires. I asked what happened to the old tires I was supposed to receive. Shop owner said the old tires was just a story to get me in the shop. Mr. Neighbor bought me a full set of new tires instead of the old tires he said I could have. I had a coworker about 10 years ago. We became work friends, but he was moving to another state. So on his last day, he brought and gave me an iPod Nano, back when they were fairly new, completely filled with different music that we had talked about or listened to together. No one had ever done something that thoughtful for me before. I could have cried. If you're out there, Gabe, that's something that I will always remember. My gym teacher purchased me lunch in 3rd grade after I dropped mine. I'm 34 years old and still remember this. My gym teacher embarrassed me in front of the entire grade. I too still remember this. Alternator died while I was driving home from university. Engine died as I exited the freeway in the middle of the night in a not so pleasant part of town in the days before cell phones. As I'm pushing my car out of the intersection, a guy in a truck comes up and offers to push my car to my neighborhood a good 3 miles away. He does so, and I'm pulling into my neighborhood. He simply gives a wave and drives off into the night. I never even had a chance to thank him. I took my sister who's in a wheelchair to the cinema for the first time on my own. At the end, I realized I couldn't undo the brakes and was blocking everyone. I felt like crying because I thought everyone was pissed at me, but some nice lady helped me, then took me and my sister out. She said she once had a son who needed a wheelchair. This was long ago, but I'll never forget. Once had a son, ouch. I was given access to a shower and a hot meal after being homeless for 9 months. I have 2 moments that I'll never forget. When I was younger, my mum was depressed and we had very little money. It was either eating or eating a lot. An old lady around the corner from us would invite us over for tea sometimes, or breakfast before school. She knitted me, my baby sister and my mum cardigans, socks and a blanket each one winter when it was really bad. I was at a terrible time of my life at 17, had a bad day at work, and then my train home was 1 hour plus late. I just started crying at the train station and was really wondering if it was all worth it. A woman just held me for a bit while I cried. She was a complete stranger. I've never seen her since, but I needed her, I guess. I think she saved my life that day. I was 9 years old, waiting for the school bus in Wisconsin winter. I had a thin coat, no hat or gloves. A woman driving past saw me and stopped, giving me a blanket from the back of her car. It was a long skinny one, so she wrapped it around my head and shoulders like a big scarf. I remember thanking her, but being confused. I told her I didn't know how I would give it back when I was done borrowing it. She hugged me and said not to worry. I still have that blanket. Riding my bike on a long trip through Canada. With about 50 miles to go, I had a major mechanical failure. Stuck on the side of the road in a foreign country. Within 5 minutes at least 10 cars had stopped to check on me. One guy loaded my bike in the back of his truck and drove me 30 miles to the border, where I could catch a ferry back to the US. Amazing kindness and generosity toward a stranger. He just asked that I pay it forward, and to date I've helped 5 cyclists who were broken down in honor of that promise. Canadians are so nice. They don't want anything in return. Just pay it forward. When I was in high school, a guy stole my iPod out of my backpack. I didn't think I'd ever get it back. Maybe a week later, a guy I never really talked to came up to me and told me he bought my iPod from that guy and then gave it back to me. He didn't even ask for anything in return. I literally coasted into a gas station out of gas on my motorcycle, then realized I didn't have my wallet. Some lady saw me patting all my pockets and that I was upset and offered to fill up my tank. I only let her put $5 in, which on a bike is a lot, but it meant so much to me. I ran out of petrol on my 125 not long after I started riding. Didn't realize I'd go through my reserve as fast as I did. I managed to get a few more miles down the road by laying the bike on its left side to get a few more drops into the carb, but eventually it wouldn't work anymore. I was about to start pushing when a guy pulled up next to me and said, "No fuel." I said yes, and he told me to wait. About 10 minutes later he came back with a jerry can of petrol and poured it in, but before I could offer him anything he said, "Happens to the best of us," and drove off. I assume he was a biker too and had the same happen to him once. He saved me the trouble of pushing the bike or getting recovered. I wish I knew who he was so I could repay him. At work I was complaining about heartburn once. I was still pretty new to the job. Didn't really have any work friends. Felt like an outsider. My life outside of work was pretty shit as well. The bartender on shift overheard me and ran to a nearby coffee shop to get me a chocolate milk. It definitely made the heartburn go away, but it was such a needlessly kind act. I don't think I'll ever forget it. 2 years later we are still friends, and she is definitely one of the kindest people I've ever met. I was out of a job at a time that I had to support my mother. Finally landed one, but I had to walk back and forth, and I didn't have any shoes that would hold up on the walk or the work. Went to FB and mom asked around for some hand-me-downs we could buy from someone. A day later a very kind man showed up with a brand new pair of really nice shoes he had just gone out and bought for me. He left before I could even get any money for him. I cried. The time my car broke down in the middle of the night and my phone died, and I didn't know what to do. A random stranger pulled over and told me we all need a little help sometimes, and I'll never forget her words as she helped me jumpstart my car. I was bullied in elementary school and an older boy defended me. He became my first crush, and I still remember him choking to death on a roadside, and a nice guy stopped and did the Heimlich on me. Thanks bro. Edit. More details for those asking. Leaving a park with my son. Put a hard candy in my mouth. Said something to my son. Candy slipped down my throat. Immediately knew I was flunking. Couldn't get air. Threw the car in park. Left my son wondering WTF. Started flagging down people on street. Guy and his girl stopped. Shit started to go dark. Made universal choking sign. Guy understood. I could tell he wasn't sure what to do, so I guided his hands to correct position. After 4 or so heaves the candy popped out. I gave him a big hug and we went our ways. Scariest moment of my life. Not dying per se, but dying in front of my son. I transferred in the middle of first grade to a school that did ice cream Fridays where you'd pay like 50 or 75 cents for whatever kind, and then you'd watch an educational video in the classroom. I was unaware of this when the first Friday rolled around, so I didn't have any change and neither did the kid next to me. Normally there would be a few who didn't get ice cream, but this day we were the only two. So the teacher called the both of us aside and gave us each the change required to have our ice cream. I think the biggest thing was that she didn't do it in front of the other kids, so it looked like we had brought the money all along. It was incredibly kind of her. She was a wonderful teacher outside of that as well. TLDR, I and another student didn't have money for ice cream the day everyone else did. The teacher bought us ice cream so we wouldn't be left out. Edit. I'm going to try to reach out to the school to find the teacher and send her an email, if possible, as a lot of you suggested. As a boy, I developed rheumatic fever and had to stay home for months to work through it and recover. When the lady next door found out how sick I was, she made a big pot of homemade chicken soup. It was delicious and full of healthy fresh ingredients. To this day, mom believes that it was this woman's kindness and love she put into her soup making that helped me recover faster. During the single most difficult time of my life, a stranger on Reddit gifted me $500. To me, it was a fortune. I received it while at work and just broke down. It started the change of my life, and a few months later I was able to move, met my now fiancé, had my son, and found my job. I still message them once in a while to update them on my life and continue to thank them for their generosity. But I think they abandoned their account years ago. Edit. You all have inspired me to write them another message. It's been a while. And a shout out to everyone who has or wants to do something similar. I hope you understand how earth-shattering, in the best way possible, those kind of gifts can be. I broke my foot and was trying to limp my way across campus with crutches in the pouring rain. Someone ran over with their umbrella and walked across campus with me so I wouldn't get rained on. When I was at school, I helped a girl out when she was having a meltdown in the bathroom. A few weeks later she pretended to be my friend who had been waiting to meet me when I was being followed home by two guys. We never saw each other outside of those two occasions, but I still think about her and hope she's doing okay somewhere out there. I was at a concert and a couple behind me gave me a VIP pass to get a picture with the artist because their friend couldn't come. Never will forget it. I was around 19 years old in my first year of community college. My dad has lost his job and my mom was supported my entire family. We were struggling for a while. I remember being in my night class one day starving. I figured there'd be no dinner, so I told myself I'll go straight to bed when I get home and not think about being hungry. When I got home after class, there was a giant box of Costco pizza on the kitchen counter. Apparently one of our neighbors had bought it for us because my dad fixed a part of her fence a few months back. I think it stuck with me because A, I was so fucking hungry, and B, the chances of her bringing food that night of all nights was insane to me. It might sound so stupid, but I'll never forget it. I had just lost my insurance and my epilepsy medication was over $400. The pharmacist got me some coupons that cut the price in half. She didn't have to, and it was against company policy. I now work in a pharmacy in the chain, but she did it anyway. Very nice lady. So once in high school, I ate at a Mexican restaurant and unknowingly threw away my car keys on my tray. When I was done eating, I went and asked a worker if he had cleared them off the table, and he said no, but that he had just taken the trash out to the dumpster. I remember going outside and calling my dad to ask if there was a spare, and he told me no. So I went back inside feeling humiliated and about to ask if I could look through the dumpster, only to see that this man had already dug through the dumpster on my behalf and ended up finding my keys for me. He just went above and beyond, and to this day I'm so grateful for his help. I worked in bridal for 6 years, which means I was berated by hormonal bridezillas nearly 5 days a week for 6 years. After one particularly awful day at work, I decided to get chipotle for dinner. I was defeated and exhausted. The girl making my burrito bowl genuinely asked me how I was doing, and I nearly lost it. She was the only person to be kind to me all day. I held back tears during my entire transaction. That was about 3 years ago, and I think about her kindness often. Please be kind to retail and food workers. I was bullied a lot as a kid. There were 3 boys in the neighborhood who were always really mean to me. Well, there was a new kid who had just moved in, like half the size of the neighbor boys, and he already had a target on his back because he was very flamboyant. Well, one day the boys were picking on me and this kid. It was the first time anyone ever stood up for me, and man, he got pissed. He got his ass kicked. I felt terrible, but he was super happy about it afterwards. I wish I remembered his last name. I hope he has an amazing life. When I was little, I was waiting for my aunt in a supermarket. Whenever someone exited the supermarket, the doors were automatic, so every time someone left, I stood by the doors and pretended to magically open the doors. One person said thank you.